if you were able to perform one miracle for this world, for your community, what would it be? What would it be? Well, it seems we're told from the Gospels that the first miracle that Jesus performed was at a Jewish wedding. What we're told is it was at this Jewish wedding that he turned water into wine. Now, what you have to get about Jewish weddings is that at that time, as in all time at Jewish weddings, any occasion, is that you have your caterers. You have those people that provide everything. All the food, the chopped and fried fish, the chopped liver, the bread, everything's laid on. And, well, how much wine do we need for this wedding? Well, the wedding caterers know how much wine is needed for a wedding. They know how many people are coming to the wedding, how, they get some extras. They know exactly how much food to provide, and they know exactly how much wine to provide. Right? Jesus would have known this, because this is supposedly happened after the age of 30. Right? So it's supposed to be one of his first miracles that he's done at the age of 30. I question whether this is actually a miracle. To me, this is the sort of thing that people might do. You know what it reminds me of? Britain's Got Talent. The magician who can perform, magic tricks with cards, and you put it down here and then it turns up somewhere else, right? The magician who turns water into wine. I mean, what use is that? What use is that? So first of all, you have to get the facts that there would have been enough wine and enough food at the Jewish wedding that Jesus attended, right? All weddings, right? There's enough food, right? It says in the Gospels that they ran out of drink. Well, of course they'll run out of drink, because people drink when they're at a wedding, and eventually it all goes. But as we all know, is if you've been to a wedding, anything like that, is, I'm sorry, there's no more wine, and that's it, and that's the end of it. And remember, getting really drunk is against the very commandments of God, right? And the Jewish people know this. It's all right to have a few drinks and you're very merry and everybody's laughing and it's all very nice and you're celebrating people have got married, whatever. But you don't get totally sloshed, shickered, like out of your head through alcohol. That is not the way for any Jewish person to behave. That is not the way the God of Israel would expect his people to behave at a Jewish wedding. But it seems that this Jesus has not considered that, right? All the wine's gone. There was enough wine at that wedding, right? The caterers knew how much wine to be provided and how much food, right? And he suddenly decides, oh, I'm going to perform some miracle magic trick. What will it be? I know, I'll turn the water into wine. This is the sort of thing an adolescent would think of doing. You're 15 and you think you've got the power to perform magic. What are you going to do? I know, let's get everybody shickered and drunk at the wedding. Let's see people acting stupid, talking stupid, totally out of their head from drinking too much wine. Because this is what it sounds like to me. And you have to look at this story and compare it with how the God of Israel behaved in the Jewish Bible. When the God of Israel performed miracles in the Jewish Bible, it was out of necessity and urgency. He parted the Red Sea because the Egyptians were coming after the Jewish people, and if he hadn't, they would have been killed and they would be taken back to Egypt. And the whole point was God wanted them out of Egypt and into the desert to worship him. So that's why God performed this fantastic miracle of parting the Red Sea. He provided food in the desert for 40 years and water for the Jewish people, for millions of Jewish people in the desert for 40 years. These are incredible miracles demonstrating the power of God, and this is very serious stuff. This is very serious stuff. This is not about entertainment. God is not trying to get a place on Britain's Got Talent. No. The magicians on Britain's Got Talent, they're saying, I put the card here and now it appears there and I can turn this and there's an empty hat and now there's a rabbit jumping out of it. Is that any different to the claim that Jesus turned water into wine? And can you believe that? And can you believe that from people already drunk anyway, a bit tipsy at a wedding? A bit tipsy at a wedding anyway, a little bit tipsy at a wedding. And what is the purpose of this? To me it seems so shallow that a man who has supposedly have so much power, you think of what he could do and all he can think of doing is getting people at a wedding who had already had enough to drink more drunk. And you know what happens when people drink too much? They say things they shouldn't say, they embarrass themselves, they start using bad language, they start to show themselves up. They show themselves up. And this is not the way the Jewish people are called to behave by the God of Israel. Do you honestly think that the God of Israel, knowing that the caterers have already provided sufficient and adequate wine for a wedding, for a celebration, is going to start giving all these people more and more and more wine? No, he's not going to do it, because he knows what will happen. People will get drunk and they'll start saying and behaving in a way that is not acceptable to God, that goes against Torah. People start behaving in debauched ways, and people start to, you know what people are like, they get aggressive, they can get violent, arguments start, fights start, women start sort of saying things they shouldn't be saying and getting very amorous with people they shouldn't be doing, and everything goes to pot. There's nothing wrong with having a drink or two, but you don't do it in excess. We all know this. This is common sense. So you have to question the validity of believing that a man who is supposedly sent from God would actually do a thing like this. I don't believe it. I don't believe that the God of Israel would send anybody, who's supposed to be some sort of example to the Jewish people, that he would be facilitating them to get more shikkered and to get more drunk. I just don't believe it. And this is the sort of thing you expect to see on Britain's Got Talent. This is exactly the sort of thing you expect to see on Britain's Got Talent. A tank full of water presented to Simon Cowell, and look, it tastes like wine. This is magic. This is magic. And it's of no use. It's of no use. It's of no use. The world doesn't need this. This is not supposed to be the role of the Messiah. There is no expectation in Judaism anyway that the Messiah would perform miracles. This is not an expectation or a hope in Judaism that the Messiah would perform miracles. And I think if a Messiah was going to perform miracles, he's going to come up with something better than just turning water into wine, which is a totally useless thing to God. And it's very suspect when you take into account the character of God demonstrated in the Hebrew Bible and what miracles he does. God, the God of Israel, only performs miracles for survival, to rescue people, to save people, for very important, serious matters, right? He's performing miracles for a very serious purpose. He's not just turning water into wine so people can get drunk, when they've already had enough to drink. Are you with me here? Are you with me here? So I don't believe this. And this shows you the gospel writer was not an Orthodox Jew. The writer, the person who came up with that story, was not an Orthodox Jew, because any Orthodox Jew would know and will know today that providing excess wine at a wedding is not halakhically, it's not under Jewish law correct. You can have a glass of wine, a glass or two of wine, you celebrate whatever, but you don't get stoned, you don't get drunk, you don't get out of your head with alcohol. And that's exactly what would have happened if the water had been turned to wine. The fact is, don't feel sorry for these people. Don't think, oh dear, there wasn't enough wine for them and Jesus helped them. There was what? Get real. There was more than enough wine for those people to drink at the wedding. There was more than enough food. The reality is, as we know from this world, people are greedy. There's never enough food for people to eat, and there's never enough drink for people to drink. If it's there, people will drink it. If the food is there, this is why people will get fat. The reason we have world obesity is because people are eating too much. The reason why we have so much alcoholism, because people are drinking too much. It's there and people take it. It's cheap. It's free. Buy one, get three free. Buy a bottle of wine for 20 pence. Buy a bottle of wine for 5 cents. This is ridiculous. If you do this, you will end up with an alcoholic nation. And this is not the way any servant of God would behave, and nor would any Orthodox Jew behave. They wouldn't be doing this. And so this, to me, the very fact of this story that somebody's come up with is ridiculous. It's childish. It's immature. It's the sort of thing a kid would say at 15. Oh, you never guess what happened? He turned all the water into wine. No Orthodox Jew, if they had the power, would do that. No Orthodox Jew would do that. They wouldn't. If a Jew has the power to do something, they're not going to turn water into wine. And this is not the role of the Messiah, right? He is not expected to perform miracles. And if he was going to perform a miracle, he is not going to turn water into wine and get people who already had enough to drink to get totally drunk and out of their heads with alcohol. And so I totally reject this story. This story of magic is great for Britain's Got Talent. Simon Cowell would be very, very impressed if Jesus turned up on Britain's Got Talent and turned the water into wine, right? But that is of no use to the world. That is no use to the Jewish community. When the God of Israel demonstrates his miraculous power, it's to save lives, it's to preserve lives, it's to rescue people, right? It's for very, very, very important reasons. It's not just to get people drunk at a wedding.